Salvete discipuli. Today we're going to continue our discussion of the uses of the dative case, specifically the use of the dative case with certain compound verbs. And before we begin, let's take a look at our previous uses of the dative case. By far, the dative case is most frequently used for indirect objects, those words that we need to translate as to or for, because an indirect object is the person or thing to or for whom something is said, given, or done. And you'll notice that we have a number of trigger words, specifically various verbs of saying or giving or doing. And in our example, lecticarios vobis conduxi, here we have our hidden subject in the perfect tense, I hired. Whom did I hire as a direct object, directly receiving the action of being hired? I hired litter bearers. And for whom were these litter bearers hired? With our dative pronoun vobis, I hired litter bearers for you. We've also discussed that the dative case is frequently required with an impersonal verb, or those verbs that need to be translated with an it subject, specifically two impersonal verbs, licet, it is allowed, or necessa est, it is necessary. And in our example, Romanis non licet intra urbem sepulchra habere. Here our impersonal verb non licet needs to be translated with the subject it. It is not allowed for whom? For the Romans in our dative case. And what is it not allowed for the Romans? It's not allowed for the Romans to have tombs inside of the city. And finally, we very briefly broached the topic of the verb apropinquo, to approach, and the fact that this verb specifically requires the dative. So in our example, apropinquamus urbi, we are approaching the city, although we would expect the word city to be a direct object because it's the thing that we are approaching. It receives the action of the verb. In Latin, we don't use the accusative case with that direct object. Instead, we use the dative case. And that's what this video is going to focus on, is why apropinquo, to approach, requires a dative object. We'll look at that verb a little bit more closely later on, but the reason why apropinquo requires a dative is because it's a special type of compound verb. And a compound verb is any verb that has a prefix, such as our examples trahere versus extrahere. And here you can see that it has a prefix in front of it. And this prefix is going to change the meaning of the verb ever so slightly. With just our base verb trahere without a prefix, equi raedam trahunt, the horses pull the carriage. If we add a prefix such as ex to our base verb trahere, the meaning of this verb will change. Equi raedam extrahunt, the horses pull out the carriage. And so by the addition of a prefix onto our base word, we're going to change the meaning of the verb ever so slightly from pull to pull out. Another example, this time with vocare and convocare, where vocare means to call. Princeps senatores vocat, the leader calls the senators, perhaps on the telephone, who knows. And then with our prefix con added to the base verb of vocare, the meaning convocare is going to be slightly different than just calls. Princeps senatores convocat, the leader calls the senators together. And so the addition of a prefix to a base verb in Latin and in English for that matter will change the meaning of the base word ever so slightly. Now, where do these prefixes come from? A lot of the prefixes that we attach to the front of a verb are either identical to or very similar to the prepositions, some of which you already know. And in addition to being the same forms, the same words as the prepositions, they're also frequently going to have the same or similar meanings. So as each prefix appears on the video, go ahead and pause the video so that you can write down each of the prefixes plus their meaning, and then I'll go through and pronounce the prefixes for you and tell you what they mean. Our first prefixes are ab, abs, or a, which mean away from, coming from our prefix coming from our preposition a or ob. Our prefix ad means to or towards, the same as our preposition. Our prefix ante means before. Our prefix circum means around, and this is the same as the preposition as well. Our prefix con means along with or together. It can also be used to just emphasize the meaning of the word and to mean really or truly. And this particular prefix is the same as our preposition cum, and it just undergoes a spelling change. Our prefix de, meaning down or down from, the same as our preposition. A prefix dis or di, meaning apart or in different directions. The prefix a or x, meaning out or out of, the same as our preposition. A prefix in, meaning into, in, or on, depending on the circumstances. Again, the same as the preposition. And the prefix inter, meaning between, the same as the preposition inter. A few more prefixes coming your way. Remember to pause the video so that you can write all of these down before we review them. The prefix ob means for the sake of, which is similar to our preposition in Sid space. Our prefix per, which means through and can also be used for emphasis, similar to the prefix con, to mean really or truly. Our prefix post, which means after, and this is the same as our preposition as well. Our prefix prae, the same as the preposition, means in front or ahead of. The prefix praeter means past or beyond. The prefix pro or prod means forward. The prefix re or red means either back or again. The prefix sub means under or below, the same as our preposition sub. The prefix supra means above or beyond, same as the preposition supra. And the prefix trans or tra means across, the same as the preposition. Now you'll probably notice that some of these prefixes were bolded, and I want you to go back through your notes and make sure that you put stars by all of the bolded prefixes, because it's these specific prefixes with compound verbs that lead to a particular use of the dative with the compound verb. And it's only those particular prefixes that will sometimes take a dative. And what is unusual about the uses of these compound verbs is that in Latin we need the dative, even though the English is not going to require a translation of to or for. And let's go ahead and look at some examples. Going back to our verb that initiated this conversation, apropinquo, as we can see by the breakdown, apropinquo is in fact the verb propinquo plus the preposition ad, and ad is one of the prefixes that require a use of the dative. So when we have a main verb apropinquo, our direct object is going to be in the dative case. They were approaching the city. Now we want to recognize that this is a use of the dative. This does not have accusative direct object endings. However, in the English, we're going to translate it like it is a direct object. You'll notice that there is no translation of to or for in my sentence. I don't say that they were approaching to the city, and I don't say that they were approaching for the city. Instead, we're going to, in English, treat it like it is directly receiving the action of the verb. They were approaching what? The city. Likewise, a similar verb, and unfortunately there is a spelling error in this particular example. It's corrected, however. Ibi fortasse patri tuo occurremus. Here, occurremus is our compound verb, and it is the prefix ob plus the verb curro, to run for the sake of, and with this compound meaning, occurro instead means to meet. If you're going to run for the sake of something, you're going to run to meet a person or a thing. So therefore, ibi fortasse patri tuo occurremus means perhaps we will meet your father there. And once again, even though patri is a dative, we're going to translate this particular word as if it were a direct object in English. And this is all due to the fact that it has one of those prefixes that sometimes require the dative. Now, to help you remember the multitude of prefixes that will sometimes require a dative, pay particular note to these prefixes, the ones that were previously bolded. Pro, sub, ad, circum, in ob, ante, super, inter, prae, con, which is the same as cum, and post. And you will probably notice that some of these letters are capitalized, and that is for a good reason. You can rearrange these dative prefixes to create a mnemonic to help you remember that they require the dative case. We all know how much Magistra loves Harry Potter and coffee. So once again, those dative compound prefixes are pro, sub, ante, circum, in, ob, ad, super, inter, prae, con, which is the same as cum, and post. While you're reading in your Ecce Romani textbooks, there are two verbs in particular that you need to make sure you recognize as requiring a dative and be able to explain any uses of the dative that you encounter with these words. The first one being our primary example, appropinquo, appropinquare, appropinquavi, to approach. And our second being the example from our second example, occurro, occurrere, occurri, to meet. Both of these are base verbs that have a prefix, making them a compound verb. And because of the prefix that each has, either od for appropinquo or ob for occurro, these verbs require the dative case. That's all for our discussion on the dative use with compound verbs. Valete discipuli.